Hi and welcome to the channel today. My name's Neil McCoy-Ward. If you've never seen any of my videos before, I basically talk about alternative economics and financial forecasts, usually very different to what the government says. So just be aware of that before we get into the video. So I've had a number of requests, in fact dozens of requests, to actually analyse Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer of the United Kingdom, to analyse the 2021 through to 2022 budget today. So I've seen there's a lot of videos already out there on YouTube. What I don't like to do is to just rush and get a video out there, which are very surface level. I've seen a couple of them, and they're really just repeating what the Chancellor has said. That's not really any use to anyone. So what I'm doing in this video is I'm looking at what he has said, point by point, and I'm going to give you my forecast and analysis on his statements today, as well as just going over what I think will happen in the future and whether or not I agree with the Chancellor, whether I think he's done the right thing or whether I think he's made some mistakes with some of the announcements. And this is going to be one of 3 videos I put out this week. One is on the budget. The second one is this weekend, an interview with GERALD CELENTE that will come out this weekend. And then the third video is an investment video. Again, this will go into my private community as it does every single month, talking about investments, what investments to make this month, this year, going forward into 2022. So let's start then with the biggest question that we all had, which was, how is this budget going to affect us and how is he going to fill this black hole? So I've got some data here which I've just pulled off, and I'll throw this grid on screen in a moment. But the biggest thing that I was concerned with this budget was government borrowing has reached 271 billion with a B pounds over the last year. So that's 222 billion more than the year before, which was 50 billion, roughly, give or take a few M's for the millions. So the biggest problem here, this has pushed up the national debt to 2.13 trillion with a T. Once you start getting to these sort of numbers, it really becomes irrelevant. Most people can't even comprehend a trillion, which is 1,000 billion, and a billion is 1,000 million. I mean, when you get to these numbers, it's just insane. In essence, this is roughly 100% now of GDP, gross domestic product, for the United Kingdom. This is a big problem. We haven't seen GDP at this level since World War II. So looking at this grid then, we have national insurance contributions at 145 billion, income tax at 194 billion, and then VAT at 134 billion. So these are the 3 big ones that I've been looking out for on this budget. And I've got to say, I was very surprised that there wasn't any change to any of them, but we'll come on to that in a moment. So key points: UK economy shrank by 10% in 2020. If you've seen my video, you know I disagree with that GDP forecast. I think it's a lot more than 10%. I think they have fudged the numbers and they've done some very creative accounting there, shall we say. And the reason for that is because they've included much of the stimulus and the government spending, the furlough, all these other programs, they've included that in the GDP. So they've included government spending in the GDP, which is a little bit strange because what has government spending got to do with the gross domestic product of the country? Nothing at all, really. And worse yet, they may have included it twice. So one was their spending, and second was once they've given it to the people, furlough and everything else, then the people will spend that money. So it could even be a lot worse than even I thought. Next point then, the economy is forecast to rebound in 2021, apparently with predicted annual growth of 4% this year. I disagree. I don't think that will happen. I'll come on to why shortly. Economy forecast to return to pre-COVID levels by the middle of 2022 with growth of 7.3% next year. Again, I don't agree with that at all. What I think is going to happen is, yes, we're going to have somewhat of a boom as we come out of the lockdowns in the United Kingdom, but I think it's going to be very short-lived. We'll have this big revival. Everyone will feel good again. But then due to employment scarring, I think we're just going to go into quite a bad recession as we go into 2022 and beyond. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we go into a greater depression in 2022 through to somewhere around 2024, anywhere around that period. But again, it really depends what the government does. If they keep creating more and more currency, not money, more and more currency out of thin air, putting it into the monetary supply, you're going to keep seeing what's going on right now, rising asset prices. Again, I'll come on to that when we talk about the stamp duty holiday here. 700,000 people have lost their jobs since the pandemic began. Unemployment expected to peak at 6.5% next year, lower than the 11.9% previously predicted. Again, this is just, there's no way this is going to happen. So if they forecast this correctly and they include those people who are not currently looking for work, known as discouraged workers, as well as a lot of people who've been made redundant and things like this, there's no way it's going to be that low. It will be a lot higher. Again, fudge numbers in my opinion. Can you just do me a quick favor and click the like button on the video? Just helps the video to actually get ranked, and why not subscribe if you haven't already? Thank you. One other point to pick up on this budget was there seemed to be, I don't know if you noticed this, a disconnect between the Bank of England and the Chancellor. So this is known as monetary policy, fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the government policy. They're very different policies. The Bank of England here expected a full recovery. So they said the UK economy is like a coiled spring ready to bounce back. The Chancellor didn't seem to agree with this, expecting a full recovery in 2023. Now that's quite interesting. If you listen to the linguistics, shall we say, the language that the Chancellor was using, there were some contradictions there, if you ask me. He was saying that we're going to go into this big recovery, and he talked about vaccines and all this other stuff. But then he said 2023 several times. So to me, I'm saying, what is it? Is it a 2021 or is it 2023? There's obviously something that's not being spoken there. There's obviously something that he knows and his team of economists know, which I would suspect is that we are going to go into this short recovery and then a downward spiral further. They will probably then start to do more fiscal policy in accordance with the Bank of England monetary policy. But we've really got to see, this is just going to try and inflate asset prices further. But I do want to talk about one point here, which was that the unemployment numbers expecting to shrink. Again, I don't agree with this. I think unemployment numbers are going to increase, especially once we get into winter. So this is 2021 into 2022, the overlap here. I think we're going to see rising unemployment. Once this furlough program ends, which has been extended now to September, so it was going to end very shortly, now being extended to September, I think we're going to see a lot more unemployment. And I think this will help to bring the economy down with somewhat of a thud, because what we have right now is an oversupply of production. So when you have an oversupply of production like we have, and then you go into a recession, and again, I talk about this a lot on my investment videos in my private community that I have. When you have this oversupply and you go into a recession, you have something called unemployment or employment scarring. So that means the people who are employed, what happens is they are the consumers. So they are 60–70% of all GDP are the consumers. And again, I'm not including the government statistics here. So when they start to lose their jobs, they're no longer able to spend. And when they don't spend into the economy, what this means is that the businesses start to lose money. When the businesses are losing money, and again, they're already carrying a loss over the last 12 months, businesses start to lose money. What do they cut first? More employees. So again, you go back into this cycle. So the consumer, again, the employee, you're getting cuts and around, cut, around, cut. And this is how recessions very quickly turn into depressions. So I'm surprised the Chancellor didn't take any actions against this. One thing I would have done straight away is cut the VAT level. I would have cut it to about 10%, since VAT was an EU policy anyway. Very complex, very expensive for small businesses, small to medium-sized businesses. I know I have several of these sort of businesses who are SMEs, and it's very expensive. It's a few thousand, if not 5–6,000 a year, just to do the accountancy on VAT returns, and it's pretty useless anyway. I don't see the point in VAT. I think it should be replaced with a new type of sales tax on products, similar to what we have in the United States. The other thing I wouldn't have done, which is what the Chancellor has done, is frozen corporation tax levels. I would have brought it down from 19% to 10%, not for a long period of time. And please don't get me wrong. Don't think, Neil, you just want to help the companies. No, that's not it. When you reduce the corporation tax level, this spurs more entrepreneurs and existing entrepreneurs to open more business, to expand their investment into the business. This is all good for GDP growth. It's good for employment because it means they'll employ more people. This is good for employment scarring. It will reduce it quite rapidly. Now, of course, he did say he's going to increase corporation tax for the big companies to 25%. Don't be fooled by this. This is smoke and mirrors. The large multinational corporations, they pay very little tax into the UK economy anyway. Don't believe me? Check it for yourself. Their headquarters are in the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, all these places. So they're not paying the tax anyway. So this is really not going to make much of a difference. All it will do is psychologically, these sort of medium-sized business owners will think twice before growing and investing further because they think, well, I don't want to pay into the 25% tax bracket. And the Chancellor said, oh, we're still below the G7 and all this sort of thing. Yes and no, there's some truth to it. It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant whether or not we are above or below those countries because they have very slow GDP growth. If you want fast GDP growth, you cut these things down and you just take the pain as a government, you take that pain for a very short period of time just to get that rebound going again. 3-4 years, something like that. And in the meantime, you keep interest rates low so that the government can pay these debts. The government is in a liquidity trap right now. We have interest rates at pretty much zero. So as soon as the interest rates are grown, they go up. What is the government going to do? How is it going to pay its debts? This is the question that we've got to ask. How on earth are they going to pay these debts? We're already at 100% of GDP. I don't know how they're going to get out of this liquidity trap. Perhaps they'll raise interest rates, but as soon as they do that, they're going to crash the stock market. They're going to crash the housing market. It's a difficult position to be in. And I think that's a very good segue here into the housing market. So as I predicted, I said that the stamp duty holiday, if I were the Chancellor, I would extend it by about 6 weeks, just so that those people currently in the chain were able to complete, because otherwise you're going to have all these broken chains. It's going to cause a lot of disruption. So that's exactly what has happened, and it's now been extended to the end of June 2021. So come 1st of July 21, we could see some troubling signs in the housing market. Again, I've been saying that the housing market, once all of this fake money is over, once they finish all of this printing, we're going to have some problems in the housing market. It's very difficult to forecast, ladies and gentlemen, exactly when the housing market is going to turn negative and we're going to see this housing market decline. The reason is because they keep putting more money into the economy, which is fake money. It's from the Bank of England. It's not as if they're creating new money here. They're just printing new currency to expand the currency pool. What does this do? It pushes up the price of assets like stocks, like houses. And this is why we're seeing this rapid rise in the housing market. It's not because the housing market is growing, because the housing market is doing great and it's a rising business market. That's not it at all. As soon as you start printing new currency, everything rises. But also the British pound is losing value because you steal from the savers that are currently saving money in the bank when you print new currency into existence. And then, of course, the Chancellor will say, now pay capital gains tax on these big rises that you've had, even though you haven't really had the big rises, because that is inflation in action, pumping up the asset prices. It's a very good trick. But the Chancellor obviously has some very good advisors here, because they've said, ooh, I've got an idea here. Why don't we offer these terrible 95% government-backed mortgages that we did back in 2005 to 2007? Why don't we do that? This will hold up the housing market. And that's true. It will hold up the housing market and help it to grow further against a backdrop of falling prices from all of the other things that will happen. So it's very difficult to say what will happen. We're probably going to be about even, possibly going down a little bit percentage-wise. at the end of all these programs. But mark my words, these 95% mortgages are a trap. They are a terrible thing for the rest of us, because these are the mortgages that contributed to the housing crash in 2008. Because what did people do that had only put down 5%? And the housing market fell, what, 30, 40% in some places? People just walked away. They said, I've put 5% in. Why am I going to hold on to this house when it's dropped 40%? I'm not going to do that. So they walk away, they give the keys back to the bank, and 5 years later, they can do it all over again. So I do think it's a big mistake. I personally wouldn't have offered these mortgages. The Chancellor's saying he wants to help more people to get on the housing ladder, but it's the wrong way to go about it. If you want to help more people to get on the housing ladder, you stop all the fake liquidity, the fake money printing, and all this, a lot of people watching at home think, all this furlough, the government's paying. The government doesn't create money, okay? And neither does the Bank of England, although, it's an interesting topic, it's one to debate. They create currency. It's very different from creating productivity. So the government is borrowing all of this money via treasuries and bonds and things like that with the Bank of England. It's all got to be paid back. The government doesn't make any money. It gets its money through taxes. And this budget hasn't addressed how that's going to come about, how it's all going to be paid back. But mark my words, it's you that's going to be paying it. You're the one going to be paying back all of this furlough, all of this mortgage stuff, everything else that's going on. And who are the people that are going to suffer the most and suffering already? It's small business owners, the middle class and the working class. And it's only going to get worse. Whilst the billionaires, in society, they've grown by over $1 trillion this year in terms of $1 trillion, but that cross-references across to the UK as well. We are seeing this K-shape in wealth inequality right now. So the one point I was surprised by, I didn't think that the Chancellor would do this, but he's frozen income tax, national insurance, VAT, which again I think he should have reduced, fuel and alcohol duties as well. I was sure he was going to go after the fuel duties and the alcohol duties, but he didn't. And these were really low-hanging fruits. I'm very surprised he didn't go after these. But here's a statistic for you, if you want to be even more annoyed by this video. Fuel tax is roughly 65%. So every pound that you spend, 65 pence of that goes to fuel tax. And here's the crazy thing. They say, oh, it's only 20% and, stuff like that. But actually what happens is that the 20% fuel tax, and then you have the other costs associated with fuel and selling it retail. They then put VAT on top of the fuel tax. Think about that for a second. They put the VAT on top of the fuel tax. So this is why you end up with 65% tax on every pound of fuel. It's immoral. And then the big one that everyone was looking out for was the furlough. I was somewhat surprised. I didn't honestly expect him to extend the furlough. So it's been extended now to the end of September. I didn't think that would happen. I thought, what better time to end it right in the summer? Let's get people, hot weather, warm weather, let's get people back into work. We're probably going to have very low cases of, viruses and colds and flu and everything else during the summertime anyway with the hotter weather. Let's get people back into work right now. But what he's done, I think, is a mistake. And, I'm sorry to say that, I don't want to criticize, but I think it's a mistake to extend it to September. Because then, you go into October, November, December. These are not our peak months in the UK. I don't think this was a good idea. I think this is only going to increase the unemployment rate as we go through the winter. And I actually have employees on furlough right now, so working very small hours every week, but still getting 80% of their pay. I'm also topping up their salaries as well, so they're still getting 100%. I think really the Chancellor should have allowed companies at this stage. I think any employer has got to the point now where we're working with our employees to help them out, making sure they don't lose their jobs, and if they do, they get a good severance package, or we help them into other jobs. That was one of the plans that I put in place. I made sure that there were, I spoke to other business owners, CEOs. I wanted to try and get a couple of my employees placed in other jobs that were relevant for them. And I've helped with that. So now to extend this furlough again, I think personally the Chancellor should have allowed the business sector to self-correct this themselves, and really just to help the people who are on furlough to either get back into work. Again, I've got one man that works for me, brilliant guy, absolutely brilliant. And we agreed that we would just reduce his hours and with his pay with it. So it was, a small reduction in pay, 25%. Reduce the hours as well to reflect it so he could get some part-time work elsewhere. So, these are the sort of things that we need. We need entrepreneurs to solve the problem. We don't need the Chancellor to keep kicking the can down the road, because it makes us not want to take action. And then what's going to happen? The rug's going to be pulled just as we go into winter time, and there's going to be a lot of problems with unemployment, especially in the retail, the hospitality, the leisure sector. But the Chancellor has outlined here a £5 billion grant scheme to help struggling high street shops and hospitality firms in England to reopen after the lockdown. £5 billion is just nowhere near enough money, and really it's not going to go towards the small businesses, because a lot of them have now collapsed. They simply won't be able to continue on, especially when they have to pay back these loans, these COVID loans that they've taken out. A lot of them are just not going to be able to pay these loans back. Business hasn't improved for people. In fact, it's continued to go down with these lockdowns. Customers aren't going to rush back as well to do business again. I really just can't see it. There'll be just like the last lockdown that we had, you'll have people rushing out to go into businesses again and enjoy themselves again, but it'll be short-lived. We don't have the same amount of money in households that we did before this whole crisis started. So people are going to have to make cutbacks. And just as we get into the last points now, there was a really good point that he made on upskilling people. This is one thing I definitely agreed with him on. Tens of thousands of small businesses will be offered free MBA management training to help them boost productivity growth. This was a fantastic move by the Chancellor. Really happy to see that announced. I think it's a great thing to do. One thing I would say though, if it were me, I wouldn't have just allowed the small, the businesses and things like that. I would have opened this up to everyone. I would have put a team together and said, okay, these sectors are dying. They're probably not going to go back. Retail is being crushed. It's probably not going to come back. We need to get a team together of experts who are good at trending and forecasting the future, and start looking at more digital things. What are we going to be seeing in the future? Okay, now we've got this plan. This is what we think is going to happen. Let's put a plan in place with all these universities and colleges which have just lost a lot of their occupancy in students, not getting international students this year. Let's open this up with some really smart minds and put on some free courses so that all the people who have lost their jobs in retail, hospitality, leisure, tourism, let's get them in and allow them to train in whatever they want, and let's pay for that with the government money. We've already spent so much already. What's another couple of billion on top of hundreds of billions? So this is what I would have done. I wouldn't have just left it open so that people are going to try and go back into their old sectors, which have been decimated. They're not going to exist. People are going to be competing for a small amount of jobs. And then finally, we've got the vaccinations, 1.65 billion announced for that. Very interesting. They've only announced it for 1 year. What's going to happen in a year? Is this just going to disappear, this whole crisis that we're in, the lockdown crisis? I don't know. I mean, that's confusing to me. A bit suspicious as well. Why only announce this funding for 1 year? Why not announce it for the next 2 or 3 years as we go forward? I don't know. But I hope you got a lot of value from watching this video today. Please click the like button if you haven't already. Why not subscribe to the channel? But apart from that, take care, God bless, and I'll see you all soon.